Thank you all for joining. Yeah, I'm Wouter. I'm a web developer since ages, and a mobile developer also since ages, and a native developer, that is. And since 3 years, I'm using React as a freelance developer and consultant. We came across a little bit of a challenge last year with one client who has a platform, which is an e-health platform, and they had one client who said, we need a desktop application for our Windows environment because they use thin clients, and they want to monitor all their activities, but also do a rollout with the binaries of a Windows platform. So they said, can't we make a Windows desktop application from the things we have? Now, it's a great challenge, so we took that on to make the React Native part, because we thought that was the best part to port to the desktop side, to see if we can make a desktop application out of it. But we thought, maybe we should take a broader approach and see how we can do it in the desktop in the general sentence. The only thing is that it is a really big application, so we'd say let's start small and try to make one small piece of it first, and then eventually roll out more of it if it works, and if you see if it's valuable for the customer, and see if that happens to be the case. So, of course, the first question is, why should we make a desktop application other than making one for a client? Well, desktops are still not, you can see here, not the greatest part of the ecosystem, but it is still a large part of the ecosystem which we rely on. And of course, the web browser is the first thing we think of when making something for a desktop with React. But sometimes, like with this client, we don't, because the enterprise loves binaries and doesn't like the web that much, because it isn't controllable as they would like it to be in the sense of monitoring, governance, etc. So that's why the question came up, because health is a really regulated market. So, and what we see is that what we see in the market also with developing tools, that we get a convergence of tools that we can make it on for one platform and roll it out on others. So on the native side, for example, we have UWP, which is Universal Windows Platform, which was released by Microsoft with Windows 10. So we can build one application and put it on an Xbox or on the HoloLens, or put it on, of course, on a mobile, which was then a thing. Now it isn't. But so you will see that there is a convergence from how manufacturers or software makers sees it. Also, Mac has, or Apple has made the announcement last year to make the iOS applications viable for the Mac OS, so that you make an iOS application and you can roll it out on Mac OS, and that is called, they call it now Marzipan, which should be released this summer, we guess. We never know with Apple, of course, and so there also you see the convergence of the desktop platform and the mobile platform. Of course, we have the big elephant in the room, which is Elektron, which is really, really vastly used in the community for web developers, of course, but also for desktop applications, as it's a really fast way to make a desktop application with web development or with web tools. So. And also, lastly, we see the Android also has, because they cannot lack, of course, they have, as they call it, the players, which is like on Chrome OS or on Chrome itself. You can run an Android application on it, and it just works in that sense. But of course, there are some caveats to it, but it should work. So with this knowledge in hand, we went on to a quest to see which one is the one we want to choose. So which one are viable for us or for the client to see what to make that application work in their environment. So, and we took a broad approach. So we wanted to see every aspect of it, and also to see if it runs and if it performs. And so we took out to do all. Not all of them, but the most of them that are there. So, like I said, Elektron is, I think, the biggest one. Of course, it's web technology, not React Native technology. So there should be a way to. We thought that there should be a way to use it, just like May did in the previous presentation. So that was the first one we take a look at. The next one is React Native macOS, which was firstly called React Native Desktop, but because it's only macOS, they changed the name. It is made by Dima, which is a great developer, by the way. And he even made plugins like for the touch bar and for all the macOS parts that are there. So that was another option to see, can we make this one work in our project? The next one is, of course, the UWP one, which is React Native Windows, made by Microsoft itself. Microsoft itself is really putting a lot of effort in React Native, which is great in that sense that it's building its community around it. Also the tools like Visual Studio Code, and so Microsoft is really into React Native. They also use this approach with Skype, for example. Skype uses this same approach, which is React Native as a UI, and then dropping down to the native part with React Native Windows. The next one is the React XP. Also, in the previous presentation, we saw it also, which is an abstraction layer on top of React, and so it has the same primitives, but they call it differently. But the outcome is different, like you see in the picture. It's like the outcome can be web, the output can be React Native, or the output can be React Windows. And they say they use macOS, but they don't. The macOS wrapper is just an Elektron wrapper. But I think the intention was to make it really, really native. But we didn't like it that much because of the changing of primitives. It wasn't really clear for the developers what to use or what things to add. And you should, if you take the approach of you begin with the React XP, maybe it works. But like Adam said with Mate, I haven't seen one successful or one application that uses it, so we don't know what the success rate is there. So that's the thing with this. So this one isn't one we wanted to do or wanted to figure out even further, but it is an interesting approach to see, and we will wait to see what happens in the future with it. And of course, there are some other products or ways like Proton Native, which uses the same declarative React Native components and APIs, but it isn't. It just translated it to native code, which is really interesting. But we cannot use the same code or the code we have or the same approach for it that we want to use, that we have already. So that isn't a viable option. So, and all the other options were more like the same. It's like if you use that product, it's only that's what you can use. And of course, it's a lot of alpha betas and not really developed in that sense, and a broader community and successful stories about those other products. So the next step was, of course, getting it to work. And what we did is we took those three, so that is Elektron, React Native macOS, and React Native Windows, and see can we put the application into that environment, see what happens, see what doesn't work, of course, what works, and see if we eventually, of course, can make that small desktop application for the client. So the first one, like I said, is the Elektron one. Fortunately, there is some work already done for it by Paul Cam. It's the React Native Elektron package, which what it does, it transcompiles the React Native to, or not transpiled, it gives you access to the Elektron wrapper in that sense in Elektron itself. So you can do the web view, for example, you can do the linking opening and etc. from your React Native code, which is really great. It uses, and Adam mentioned it as well, React Native Web, which is a totally different topic, which can do another talk on is how that works. But what that does, it does indeed transcompile the React Native views, etc., to divs, etc. So you have a browser-based version of your React Native app, which works in a sense. It works, but the downside there is that that's not up to date in React Native or React itself. So it is lacking some support for hooks, for example, because it isn't there yet. So you need to wait until they update it before you can go ahead. And the state of React Native Web is also not clear at this point. That's a little tricky. But so with that package, you can transcompile, or it will compile something to web, which is included in the Elektron bundle, and you have a desktop application. That's the main thing. It uses Webpack for it, which is fine in my opinion, because it works. Like I said, that's the real downside. Is the React versions are lower, but also fixed, so you cannot update it yourself because you need to update the whole stack, which is not that convenient, of course. For this application, which we are trying to port, isn't that great of a deal because we are really conservative and we didn't use the hooks, for example, right away. So it should be doable. And because of the React Native Elektron package, we can do some Elektron stuff, but not all of it. So if you want to do it, you have to make another, not native component, but some component in between to catch it and pass it along. So that can be tricky. But if you have a really normal application and with not that much of integration into the system, it really works. And of course, there are no native modules in Elektron, so you cannot use anything with native modules from React Native. So every module that has it, you must exclude it, unfortunately, of course. So some packages aren't there. Like I said, for an easy application, that's doable. But if you have a large code base, you cannot share anything with it because it won't work. So the first thing, it's a little small, but the first thing we do, this is the latest thing you do with React Web. You just add you ask the wrapper for the HTML, and that's it. So it knows where to put all these divs, etc. into. That's the first step. The second step is making the the Webpack one, which is the Webpack configuration, which uses the React Native Elektron to see what it needs to transcompile, what it needs to resolve. The rest is really standard in that way. And then, of course, we need to serve something if we do the Webpack serve, and then it takes the file from the Elektron folder, and then it just serves that up with the main.js from Elektron. This is pure Elektron, just like a normal startup for a default application, and of course you can change it. The next up was the macOS one. We tried it, which we are going to try, and it did work out of the box in that sense that all the normal components from React Native just worked. They really performed well. But yeah, you need to adjust some part of the bundle configuration if you use existing code, like we did. Like here we go again with the native modules. Like I said, the React Native package is made reused. Now we need to adjust the method bundle to exclude everything that macOS doesn't understand, and the macOS package doesn't understand, because it won't compile in that sense if it does see all those things. And it's one thing, of course, with React itself. You need to update the Xcode project. Yeah, eventually, if you have new Xcode versions, which is all every 6 months, I guess, these days, and then it should work out of the box. Also, it's the same thing. Is the React itself isn't up to date, so it's now with I think 56 at the moment. They are building this as I think now they are at 57 or 58. They have a PR for it and are checking it and seeing if it works. But it's the same with the electrons. They are behind. And because they are small teams usually, so if you give them maybe it goes a little bit faster. And here again we have no native modules because it doesn't understand all the iOS code or the JavaScript code, so it doesn't work in the same way. It even doesn't have an API for it at this point, I thought, or we couldn't find it. It's also a possibility, of course. So So this is the excerpt of the RN config we used to make it work. So we have the different targets like the web, the Android, the macOS, and iOS. So we can exclude all the things that aren't there or that aren't needed. And of course, updating the Xcode project because that is something that is needed. Like I mentioned before, the Marzipan is coming this I hope this summer, and with some work from other people like Starton Smith, he created a small application to make Marzipan already work on Mojave as on macOS. So what I did was try just making the RN sample or the RN test application work with Marzipan, and in that sense, with the surprise, it did work really well. And the only if there is, you need to have all the latest, or everything needs to build against the latest native iOS SDKs. So it's now, I think it's 12, of 12.2 even. If not, it won't work. So that's the thing with React, of course, that we have lower base SDKs than 12 at this point. So you need to up them, and you need to exclude every framework that isn't there yet, because of course it's not released yet. So not like the Photos framework or and also the web views itself, which is deprecated, won't be there anymore. So those need to be excluded. But that really went fast. So my hope is that. With Marzipan in the future, this summer, that we can port like the React Native with 2 clicks of a button in that sense, because everything just works with the core that is already there and the bridge that is already there. So that was really nice, nice to see and nice to hack it together. And the latest one we want to try is the Windows, the React Native Windows. Which, of course, you will need Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code, but the real Visual Studio, which means you need a Windows PC, or VM, of course, to compile it, which isn't that much of a problem, but it is like Mac, you need a Mac, and with Windows, you need a Windows computer to do it. With Elektron, you can do it on both. That's the nice thing about Elektron, of course. So, Visual Studio has a free version, the community version, which is good enough for making the React Native Windows work. So. Then, of course, we have the package, which is just a CLI in that sense, for which Microsoft made to make a Windows project for you with your React Native project. So you can do that in your existing projects if you want to, which is great. And the project is just, like I said, a Visual Studio project, which has multiple items in it, like it doesn't use JavaScript core because that's iOS. It doesn't use the JCC for Android, but it uses its own Chakra core, which is NPM for Windows in that sense. And you need to set the right to Windows SDK. They have multiple versions of the same in that sense, but if the versions are correct, it won't compile it in any way. So that was one thing we bugged a lot. We had a lot of troubles with because multiple developers had multiple versions and multiple version numbers. So we need to align them because otherwise it didn't compile at all. So Also there, the same thing. React isn't up to date, so it lacks the React. I think also they are at 57 at the moment and working on 59 with the Microsoft itself is, because they want to go ahead and make that first. So they are moving towards the newest version, but like all the solutions, they are lacking because they need time to update it, and of course manpower to do so. There are not many. There are native modules for React Windows, but not that many. But the ones that are there, they're really nice. And what Microsoft did, they really made an API for it. So, like the iOS and the Android ones, we have something to talk to, an API to talk to, and then it can give you back some information or some views if you want to. So that was really nice to see that Microsoft took that effort to put that in, to make real native code for their platform, which is in C#. This is the Visual Studio, which you see has a lot of versions in it, but this is updating the version to the latest one. So we tried all three of them and made the application work in one way or another, a small part of it. And yeah, of course, then the question was, which one are we going to use? Is that the Elektron one, the macOS one, or the Windows one? And what we saw is that the macOS one is the one that is least mature. Maybe with Marzipan, and with Marzipan that will change, but the one that is now there is the least mature, so it won't. That's not an approach that we wanted, of course. The React Windows, which was really great, but the overhead for making it work on Windows with Visual Studio, and also not the SDKs, but the C# things and the things that most developers don't touch, was really great. So we went eventually. We went for the Elektron one because the community is really great, and also the packages, which is really visualized here for React Native, but also for Elektron, is really fast. The downside, of course, like I said, is that you cannot use every React Native package if you want, which you want, and also not the Elektron ones because they cannot be touched. So it's more like if it's an easygoing application, then you can do it with the Elektron or the React Native web and the Elektron one really easy. But yeah, the packages are a small problem in that sense. So we excluded the most of them in our thing. But for example, React Navigation without the native plugins which he uses these days is very viable on those systems. Of course, the navigation stack is a little bit different on desktop, but users usually adapt to it. Let's say it like that. So hopefully in the future with the changes and that are also this morning the Pureshman talked about, it will change in that sense that the native code can be directly, but also it's more agnostic, and also the change or the community which is making native modules more agnostic, so we can use them on many platforms, just like Matt Haggard showed us last year on React Native EU, which used net standard libraries for all of almost all the parts of React Native. Then we can use the full potential of the React as a view and the native part as really integrating it with the desktop application. Unfortunately, I cannot show you the application because my client said so not to yesterday, because I think he's ashamed of it, I don't know. I really wanted to show it, but I cannot. So yeah, like I said, we went for the Elektron one. So the Elektron is just with the web part. Maybe if you have a web application and you like May did, I think that's the best approach. Make a web application, the web part, make it a desktop application. But because our applications are React Native first, and then the web is more like the maintenance part of it, we went for the React Native Elektron to make it a desktop application, which they now use, and they said they are really happy with it. So, yep, thank you very much. I want to thank also the community, of course, that made those packages and made it possible to see. And also, you see a lot of improvement in that space, like making it multiple platforms and even VR and AR. So yeah, thank you very much.